Hi Pee-wee enjoyers! These are my tips for setting yourself up for success in softcore trade leagues. This video is from 3.22 Ancestor League, however these tips are general and should still work in upcoming leagues. Any tools or websites I mention I will link to in the description. These tips are aimed at beginner to intermediate players, so if you're a juicer this probably isn't the video for you. One of the most important decisions you will make for any PoE league is your league starter build. Choosing a good league starter is the difference between having a great league start and having a blast, and having a really tough time. When picking your build, thinking about its purpose is really important. What do you want to do with the build? Do you just want to get to red maps and that's it? Do you want to do a bit of bossing? Do you want it to be good at mapping? Are you going to try heist, lab running, etc.? Another thing to think about ahead of time is your budget. Is this a character that you want to put some currency into, or do you just want to use it to get to red maps, set yourself up, and then start to save for a new build? This consideration will be a little bit different depending on whether it's your league starter, a second, or a third character. If you're prepared to deal with rejigging, it can be fun to try making your own character. It's worth trying at least once. The first time you try making your own build, be prepared for it to be a disaster. The first time I did it, it certainly was. However, I learnt a lot, and the process of problem solving taught me a lot of things about what makes a good build. If you're less confident or you don't want the bother, build guides can be really good. Some of the sources that I have pulled build guides from and had good success with them are maxroll.gg, Zizarin, Crouching Tuna, Pox, Ballamage, and Gazzy TV. There are lots of other great build creators out there, but these are the ones that I've had personal success with. Good build guides will give you all the information that you need to be successful with the build. They'll give you a detailed path of building, often with a note section, different leveling and endgame trees, itemization, etc. If it's a video guide, they'll often show you some gameplay, and many guides will often show you how to craft some of the important pieces of gear for your build. Dodgy build guides will often make very unrealistic claims and will have padded POBs. I'll use the POB of the impending Doom character I'm currently gearing as an example. Some of the ways POBs can be misleading include on the config tab, not setting enemies to Guardian Pinnacle bosses. This is especially important for POBs for characters designed for bossing. You'll see that if I go from Guardian Pinnacle boss down to no, I gain a couple of million DPS. If I go from no to Uber Pinnacle boss, I lose 10 million. This setting is one that's very important to look at, especially for bossing characters. You should also look at which damage buffs are ticked in the when in combat and for effective DPS section. For example, Onslaught. For this character, I have an Onslaught tattoo, so this doesn't apply. However, if I was relying on something like a Silver Flask for my Onslaught, having this ticked would be a little bit questionable as it would not be up all the time, especially on non-Pathfinder characters. In the item section, check your flasks. Having damage flasks ticked here on a non-Pathfinder character, again, not the best idea, as it can be a bit misleading and give an unrealistic expectation of your DPS or survivability, as flasks will not be up all the time, especially on bosses. In the skills section, have a look around at what's selected. For example, if there are any Vile Auras in the build, are they ticked and enabled? This can be a little bit misleading as again, your Vile Auras are not going to be up all the time. It's also worth having a look at what's selected and what is included in the full DPS, which is shown down at the bottom here. Crafting in Path of Exile can be daunting. However, it is worth learning at least a little bit of crafting. Many build guides will dedicate part of their notes section to showing you how to craft different pieces of your gear. One thing I often do this with is cluster jewels. People crafting certain clusters will charge a premium for an item you can often make yourself much cheaper. Some cluster jewels this is not true, some of them are a right pain in the neck to make, but a lot of them, especially medium and small jewels, you can easily make yourself for a fraction of the price that someone will be charging. Craft of Exile is a great resource for crafting. This is where I come when I'm trying to figure out how I could make something for myself. If we take the cluster jewel example from earlier, let's have a look at a medium cluster jewel with flask duration. This league, I needed to make a medium that had Brood for Potency and Spiked Concoction as my notables. These are both prefixes. We can have a look at the item level of the jewel required, so level 50. What tags are attached to both of the skills that we want to see if we could potentially use fossils or harvest crafting. However, I think this league, what I did is I came and I used the emulator. So I created a new item, cluster jewels, medium cluster, flash duration, set the item level to say 55 because I know that the highest item level notable I have is level 50. Let's proceed. So we want to try to get Brewed for Potency and Spiked Concoction. That's what we're looking for. So we can start off and we can let's do some alteration spamming. Let's see if we can get something good. Oh, we've got Brewed for Potency. Okay. We also have 3% chaos resistance. That is good. If it were me, I would then try to Regal. In this case, we got Distilled Perfection, which is not what we want. But we can have a look at this and we can use it to help calculate how difficult it is using the particular crafting method to make something. The next thing to consider is your stash tabs and trading if you are in a trade league. In Trade League, I would strongly advise you to set up your stash tab, affinities and folders and get yourself Awakened PoE Trade. This is a great tool that will help you price check and figure out if items are worth keeping, throwing back on the ground or selling to others. Over the years since affinities and tabs were introduced, I've developed a bit of a system. It does not need to be as organized as mine is. I just like it this way and I've gotten used to it. One of the things I tend to do is I tend to split my tabs up into folders so I only have to look at a few things at a time. So for example, in my main folder at the moment I have my currency tab, my map tab, my fragment tab, my divination card tab, my unique tab, a dump tab, and my delirium tab. That's because these are the tabs that are relevant to the mapping that I've been doing. Otherwise, if I'm not currently using them, I'll put them over into this auxiliary tab. So I've got Blight, Metamorph, my fossil tab, gems, flasks, and essences in here because I'm not using them very much. I'll tend to have a tab for each of the builds as well. I just like to do this, especially if I'm thinking ahead to builds that I want to make and I start getting pieces for it, like for example this MF tab. Nothing in here is particularly relevant at the moment. I just have a bow attack, fire an additional arrow, fractured bow in here that I'm going to play with. But this just helps me keep myself organized and it also means that I don't have a bunch of stuff jumbled up in one tab for a bunch of different builds. My miscellaneous tab just has a whole bunch of premium tabs in it that I'm not currently using so that they are not clogging up the main window. I have a couple of tabs here at the moment because I'm running a 500 coin test in Toda just to look at rewards. I may make a video about that down the line. I tend to keep some high item level helmets and boots kicking around and belts in case I decide to do some labs, just so that I have some bases to throw enchants onto. I also make sure I have all my affinities set so that the relevant items are going into the relevant stash tab. If you're in a trade league, it is well worth getting yourself Awakened PoE Trade. Having the ability to quickly price check an item like this is really valuable, especially if you find something when you're mapping and your inventory is nearly full and you just want to quickly check, is it worth keeping or should I chuck it? It's not worth wasting your time doing this on something unless you think it is potentially worth something. One of my main pieces of advice with trading in softcore trade would be don't be finicky about your prices. I don't worry if I think I've sold something for 5 chaos less than it's potentially worth. On the flip side of that, if you put something up to trade and you get insta-spammed, it is worth price checking because it probably means you've radically underpriced. I would advise you to bulk price tabs. So at the moment, I've decided that the minimum amount of chaos I'll leave a map for is 9 chaos. Nothing that I have up here is priced for less than that. This will obviously be different depending on what stage of the league you're in, but at the moment, this is my minimum. I then have a bunch of different tabs with different prices. You can set this up however you like. I tend to set my tabs to say 99 chaos rather than 100. I'm just hoping my items get seen more. Bulk pricing your tabs is great for when you don't want to actually go through and price check everything that you've dropped. So for example, a lot of fractured items, if the fracture is not something amazing, I'll just chuck it in here for 9 chaos. Someone might want it, someone might buy it. If it doesn't sell in the next few days, by the time this tab gets full, then I'll just vendor everything. For the things that are in the higher price tabs, for example, when my 9 Chaos tab gets full, what I'll do is I'll reprice this 9 Team one down to 9, vendor everything in the 9 Chaos tab, and bump it up. If you want to buy currency from the trade site, it can be worth trying to get people to come to you by listing for the item that you want to buy, rather than sitting there for ages PMing lots of different people. So for example, if I want to trade my Chaos for Divines, rather than whispering 47 bots, I can put the right amount of currency into a public tab, then set the price. So for example, if I go in here, I've set the exact price to 1 for 233 Divine Orb, which means I'm buying 1 Divine Orb for 233 Chaos. If you're farming something that people want to buy in bulk, for example, Harvest Juice, Fossils, Essences, it's worth selling in bulk. So for example, let's have a look at my stack decks here. So I'm going to open up Awaken PoE Trade. I'm going to swap over from Chaos Orbs to Divines, and I'm going to check the price. So it looks like if I list my stack decks for say 74 for a Divine, they should sell. So I'm going to right click, change to exact price, put the price first, 1 Divine, for 74 stack decks. Make sure I change here from Chaos to Divines and click OK. And hopefully someone will buy my stack decks for a Divine. The last thing I want to say about trading is that I would rather sell things, so I will slightly underprice. I don't want to get to the end of the league and have full sales tabs, so I would rather sell things for a few Chaos less than they're actually worth and just get rid of them. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the importance of having a good loot filter. I like to use Neversink's Filter Blade. It's a really good place to start. Depending on what you're doing, you will set up different strictnesses for your filter. This is also going to vary depending on what stage of the league you're in. At league start, you'll generally show a lot more on your filter than you will by, say, week 4. The general rule is the more you juice or the more efficient you're trying to be, the stricter your loot filter should be, within reason. There are other good loot filters out there, however, Filter Blade is the one that I tend to prefer. Depending on the stage of the league, you will set your strictness differently. At this stage of the league, I'm using a very strict filter. I've set it to Velvet because that's the one I like the look of. Depending on the stage of the league, you'll be showing different things. So for example, at league start, you might be showing some chromatic items. But this stage of the league, I'm definitely not showing those. I'm still showing some kinds of flasks, but that's personal preference. With currency, at this stage of the league, I am not showing small stacks of cheap currency. So for example, I'm not showing Chance Orbs, Orbs of Binding, Jeweler's Orbs, Alts, if they're in single stacks. I will, however, show large stacks of those currencies, because if there's a few of them stacked up, it can be worth picking them up. Generally, you can come in here and you can customize this however works for you. However, keep in mind that while mapping, you want to minimize your clicks. You only want to be clicking on things that are worth your time to pick up. The next thing to think about is your hideout. You want to make it work for you. Time spent in your hideout is often time not spent generating currency. The exception to this is if you are flipping items on the trade website, if you are profit crafting, or if you're doing something like rolling items with ROG, or you are using 2gen. Another thing to consider is your hideout setup. It's quite handy to have your stashes, at least one shop, your crafting bench, hoardy crafting bench, and map device all quite close together. This helps to save you time because it means you're not running around all over your hideout in order to do the things that you need to do to get into your next map. Having a nice dense hideout can really help you play efficiently. It means you can get over to your stash tabs, drop stuff off into your dump tab and use your affinities to speed yourself up, and then get into the next map as quickly as possible. If your play strategy revolves around mapping, it can also be really worth setting yourself up to pre-roll your maps. For example, if I were running Crimson Temple maps, I would make sure all the maps were scoured, chisel them all, it's best to use chisels on a white map because then you only need 4 to get maximum quality. Then I'd go through and I'd alch them. Then I'd throw them into a stash tab. I'm using Control Shift and click to override my affinities. If I were going to be rolling a large number of maps, I would set myself up a regex. So I would go to poe.re, go to map modifiers, and then I would choose any of the map mods that I did not want to see And also if there are specific map mods that I do want, I would also set those up. I've set up this regex for my Impending Doom character. So there's only 4 map mods that I generally try to avoid, which is minus max, less recovery, reduced effective auras, and less cooldown recovery rate. I've also selected Beyond Monsters and increased number of rares as mods that I do want to see on my maps. So then I would come up here and I would click copy, and then I would go back in game. Then I'm going to come in game and I am going to paste that in here. So what this means is that any maps that have the things that I don't want, they will be highlighted. So it looks like for these maps that I have here, I do not have any of the map modifiers I want to avoid. I will also be shown any map modifiers that do have the things that I want. If your mapping strategy uses scarabs, it is worth buying these in bulk so you don't have to constantly stop. I'll often throw on a movie or watch some YouTube videos while I'm sorting stuff out. One option for buying in bulk is to use the Forbidden Trove Discord server. So I've just gone across to the bulk scarab want to buy for softcore, and in here you can post a message giving your in-game name and which scarabs you would like to buy. Alternatively, you can come over to the bulk scarab want to sell and have a look at what's on offer there. People will be using the bulk selling tool and they will have a huge list of items that they want to sell, in this case, scarabs. Another option we have is to use the bulk item exchange on the Path of Exile trade website. So we can go down here and we can have a look at scarabs. Maybe we want some expedition scarabs. I'm going to choose chaos, and then I'm going to come down and I'm going to choose my minimum amount, and I'm going to search. And what this will show me is people who are selling polished expedition scarabs with a minimum of 20 available to buy. Keep in mind that when buying scarabs like this, you will often pay a premium for the convenience. Other things to consider include making sure that you upgrade your map device to 5 slots by running 4 Legion emblems, getting your 4 Watchstones so that you can run sextants. The first 2 of your Watchstones should be quite simple. The Tutorial Eater and Exarch should be doable on League starters. For Uber Elder and Maven Watchstones, you may want to get a carry from TFT, etc. if it's needed. I usually start using sextants when I get to tier 14 maps. If rolling your own sextants, you can sell the expensive ones like Enraged Strongboxes and Harvest for a nice profit. The next thing is to have goals. Your goals can be as simple as picking up the next unique item that you need for your build, or as difficult as getting a Mage Blood. In order to stay motivated, sometimes it works better to set smaller incremental goals. For example, at the moment I'm saving up for 2 Awakened Spell Cascades for my Impending Doom character. Make sure that whatever your goal is, the currency making method you decide to use to get to it is something that you can stand doing for a decent amount of time. For example, I don't really like heisting, so I wouldn't set a goal and then depend on spamming heist blueprints in order to make the currency to meet it. Lastly, I would tell you to respect your time. Your free time is valuable, and if you're not having fun with it, change it up. There are so many viable farming methods at the moment in this game. The Atlas trees are amazing, and you can combine lots of different strategies to make things fun and interesting. Make sure your strategy works with your build. If you're trying to use a mapping character to run uber bosses, it might not work very well. Choose something you enjoy. It's a game, have fun. Thanks for checking out my video. If you got something out of it, please consider liking and subscribing. It would really help.